Hello, I'm David Gergen, and I'm here from Harvard University, where I have the privilege to teach, and also I'm a senior political analyst with CNN. But more importantly, I'm here today with two people who are right at the forefront of one of the most important struggles, fights that have gone on in this country in a long time, pertaining to energy and the environment, the future of this country, the future of the world. Tom Kuhn has been president of the Edison Electric Institute since 1990. I believe that's right. And during that time, it has become this extraordinarily influential association of electric utility companies in this country that account for some 70% of all the electricity generated in America. And with him now is Fred Krupp, who has been president of the Environmental Defense Fund for 24 years. And during that time, he has not only become one of the major leaders in the environmental movement, but very importantly, he's been one of the leaders who was pioneered in working with American companies, not against them, to see if progress could be achieved and struggling with how we produce more energy for the United States and the world and do it in a way that also addresses global warming. So welcome to both of you. And I was thinking back 10 years ago, it might have been unimaginable that the two of you were working together. This is you might have been at each other's throats 10 years ago about some of the bill that's going through Congress right now, the Waxman-Markey bill, as it's called in the House. I think people would be interested, first of all, what brought you together? Why have you become allied on the central thrust of this legislation? Tom?
Well, David, I'm very, very proud of our industry from the standpoint that we decided that we had to go from a voluntary program where we were achieving most of the reductions that have been achieved in this country on global climate change to a mandatory one about 3.5 years ago. And we came out with a set of principles that said we thought that there needed to be carbon legislation. We thought there needed to be a price for carbon to help us get there through either a tax or a cap and trade. And we began to work on again, to figure out how we could get that job done and figure out, and getting that job done, how we could mitigate the cost to the customers. And that brought us together with Fred and his efforts.
What took you across the Rubicon about going from supporting a voluntary system to a mandatory system?
Well, I think that number one, the CEOs in our industry decided that this was a very, very serious issue that we needed to address, that we needed to have a positive plan to address climate change, and that we needed to figure out how we could get that job done, how we could use all the technologies that we might have at our disposal to transform this industry to achieve major carbon reductions and at the same time meeting the electricity demands of this country.
Was it also because you needed more certainty in the industry about what you could build if you were building new power plants?
I think that, you know, in our industry we make long-term decisions. If you build a power plant, it's generally in place for 40, 50, 60 years. So we did need that certainty. We did know that need that price of carbon to be able to make the correct decisions.
You know, and Fred, was it a surprise to you when they started coming your way?
Well, no, I don't know that.
Or did you start going their way?
Well, you know, I think where we found common ground, the way to put it, David, is that wanting results and both wanting to achieve results at the lowest cost to consumers. From the perspective of the environment, what we want is the certainty that the carbon emissions in this country, global warming pollution, will be reduced. That's the number one goal for us. And it turns out that we've come to understand that we also have a stake in doing that at the lowest cost, because low cost to consumers makes it more sustainable, more supportable over the long run. And in the case of acid rain, where a cap and trade system was put in place by the first President Bush,
this was the Clean Air Act.
The Clean Air Act amendments in 1990, and with the electric utilities cooperating and implementing it, it turns out that that first increment of reduction, the 50% reduction, happened at a small fraction of the cost that was predicted. So what happened? The second President Bush, who was not a great leader on climate change, but on sulfur, he authorized the EPA to go forward with an additional 70% cut, I think primarily because the cap and trade, the market system, had produced a hunt for low-cost solutions and proven that we could take even more sulfur out of the air. And by 2005, when the EPA approved the Clean Air Interstate Rule, the scientists told us we needed that further reduction.
From your point of view, one of the bridges that you crossed as an environmentalist was some of the environmental groups were not known for caring about the consumer all that much. It's the environment, period, whatever it takes. But you actually came at it from the point of view of, in order to get at the environmental issues, we've got to be on the side of low cost for consumers.
I think most environmentalists I know do care about consumers.
Well, but there are some now who do. There's not complete unanimity in the environmental community about this bill.
Actually,
Greenpeace, for example, seems to be opposed to it.
there are a couple of groups that are not supporting the bill, but the vast majority of the American environmental movement wants a yes vote in the House, wants to move Waxman-Markey forward. We'd all like to see it a bit stronger, and you know, in some respects, and there'll be an opportunity on the Senate side to advance that cause. But the environmental movement is incredibly unified on wanting this to go forward.
Interesting. Now, Tom, coming back to you on, and for both of you really, central to this bill is the cap and trade program. And you introduced at Edison Electric the whole notion of allocations, and that seemed to have changed the conversation and changed the politics of getting the bill passed. Because President Obama had campaigned for an auction of the allowances, the permits.
That's correct.
But now the bill that's emerging, which with his support, has moved to a much more of an allocation system. Tell us how that's going to work. What are your expectations over time, and what is it going to mean to the consumer?
Well, again, I don't think that we should promise the consumer that there's not going to be increases in electricity costs to get this job done, because
Right.
again, you've got to have to transform the electricity industry, move toward cleaner energy technologies, which are not inexpensive to get this job done. But where we came together is we fully agreed that you didn't want to get a consumer backlash down the road, because then the goal of dealing with climate change would be forgotten. And it is an extremely important goal to the planet, as you indicated, that we do get this job done. So that if you can devise ways to get it done in the least possible cost to the consumer, to mitigate some of those costs to the consumer, it would be extremely important. And that's why we brought the CEOs together, to figure out a way to make that happen. Now, the allowances that will be given by the government to electricity consumers will flow through their local distribution companies. They will be regulated. The state regulatory utility commissioners will make sure that they get to the consumer. And we felt that this was the best mechanism to make sure that that happens.